Good morning. My name is Lisa Ozaida, and I'm the Associate Rector here at Epiphany. So let's start out by talking about the Bible. This fall, we're going to start a Read the Bible in a Year project with Kate Wesh, a former Associate Rector who now serves at a church in Connecticut. It'll be a great opportunity for us to explore the overarching themes of the Bible. We'll have the opportunity to learn about all of the Bible characters and to hear their stories. Did you know there are 66 books in the Bible? 39 of those books are in the Old Testament, and 27 are in the New Testament. There are 4 Gospels, and in those 4 Gospels, there's almost 4,000 verses. In all of those books, and chapters, and verses, there's only one verse that Jesus talks about his heart, and that's in today's Gospel. And he says that his heart is gentle and lowly. Over the last couple of months, Dwight has talked about the ontological nature of being human. We have talked about the soul, the heart, and our physical being. And I want to continue that discussion today, focusing on the heart, using our gospel reading and the heart of Jesus as our guide. So before we dive into a discussion of the heart, let's do a quick reminder about the soul. The soul is the part of us that comes from God. It is the part of us that belongs to God. We cannot transform the soul, and we can't do anything to it via human effort. It is God's. And as Christians, we are called to see the soul in others, recognizing that we are all the same. We may be from different background, different ethnicities, race, or culture, but we are all a part of the royal priesthood. We all have the Imago Dei, that is the image of God in each of us. While we cannot change or impact our soul, the heart is different. The heart is the home of human freedom. It is the place of decision, and it is the place of creativity. The heart chooses how to respond to ideas and emotions. It is often called the will or the spirit. The goal of the heart is character, and its response is love. And as Christians, our goal is to have a heart like Jesus. The heart is where the freedom resides. We have the opportunity to decide how we're going to follow God in each moment. Are we going to follow God's preference for us, or are we going to follow our self-interest? It's important to note that Jesus had the same freedom, yet each time that Jesus faced a decision, he chose God's preference. His heart was congruent with his soul. His decisions reflected the reality of his soul, the Imago Dei. Our task is to conform our heart to the heart of Jesus so that our decisions will reflect the Imago Dei in us. And today, he tells us that the nature of his heart is gentle and lowly. So let's start with lowly. This word refers to humility, not as a quality of being, but as a destination. The word actually means to be thrust downward. Jesus describes his heart, his act of decision, as being moved to a lowly place. That is the incarnation. Let me explain. The incarnation is the transcendent God who created all things, including the cosmos, time, and love. The God who is above heaven and earth, emptying himself and coming to live among us, to teach us how to love and to show us his heart. Jesus was thrust into humanity to be among us. And I love thinking about the God who created Mount Rainier and the Puget Sound. But I can't understand how to imitate that God. but by God living among us as Jesus through the incarnation, I'm able to see what love in action looks like. In this passage, the lowly heart means that Jesus is accessible. And what we see Jesus claim in his words about his heart, we see him prove with his actions time and time again. Let me tell you one of the ways that Jesus does that and how we can follow his example in our lives too. Jesus sees sin and suffering in the world, and his deepest impulse is to move towards sin and suffering and not away from it. Jesus was among the people. He spent time with them. He touched them. He healed them. He loved them. The heart of Jesus was not content to remain separated from those he loved. He was in the world with its problems. To have a heart like Jesus, we must also make decisions that put us among the world with its problems. The lowly heart is to accompany someone else, to go with them, if you will, in their sin and suffering without judgment, as Jesus did with us. That is to practice, if not to reflect, the lowly heart of Jesus. The second word that Jesus used to describe his heart is gentle. This is the same word that is used to describe Jesus when he is riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. He was riding towards his inevitable death, and he's described as gentle. This does not mean weak or soft. Instead, the word gentle means stillness in chaos, or confidence in strength. This was illustrated very clearly to me in a recent decision. I just returned from a trip from the Philippines to visit family, and our days were filled with food, and I mean so much food. Family and lots of stories. At one lunch, the story turned to the People Power Revolution of 1986. And to give a little background, the Philippines had been under the rule of Ferdinand Marcos for 20 years, and 14 of those years had been under martial law. And one of the main opposition leaders, Ninoy Aquino, had been imprisoned for 7 years under Marcos and had been effectively exiled to the United States. In the early 1980s, Marcos' health was failing, and the situation in the Philippines was getting worse. Aquino decided that he would return to the Philippines and attempt to convince Marcos to step down and allow a free election. Marcos warned Aquino not to return. Despite those warnings, Aquino's plane landed in the Manila airport on August 21st, 1983. And as he started to walk down the steps of that plane to begin the fight for his country, he was shot and killed and fell dead on the tarmac. The country was stunned, and the fires of revolution sparked. There were calls for Marcos to step down. He refused. The unrest grew, and there were rumors that a coup was going to try to remove Marcos. Facing continued pressure in December of 1985, Marcos declared that there would be an election in just 60 days. Aquino's widow agreed to run as a substitute for her husband. The votes came in, and both Marcos and Aquino declared victory. The country was at a stalemate, and the country was in chaos. The time for revolution was now, and the people's revolution had begun. 2 million Filipinos poured into a 14-mile street called EDSA in the city center. And these protesters included doctors and lawyers and teachers, street vendors, priests and nuns. The people were demanding fair elections and the removal of Marcos. Many of my family members were among those people. And while telling the story, my Tita Gina said that the more people that joined the protest, the more that the hope grew. And as the hope of the people increased, so did the desperation of Marcos. He sent tanks in to cut off both ends of the street and to trap the people. The order was given to disperse the people by any means necessary. The tanks started to roll in to block off the ends of Edsa. And my aunt tells of looking for the best escape route so that she would not be rolled over by the tanks or hit by flying bullets. Fear gripped the crowd, realizing the inevitable bloodshed. However, at the front of the crowd, 100 yards from the rolling tanks, 2 nuns got on their knees to pray. In the midst of this chaos, they chose stillness. They had a quiet confidence of strength. Sister Cariza is quoted saying that as she stared down the barrel of that howitzer cannon, all she could think was, "Don't kill these people whom I love." People followed the lead of the 2 nuns and got on their knees. People did not run away. The reporters and the cameramen who had been standing on the side of the street dropped their cameras and their notebooks and ran towards the tanks, trying to push them back so they would not crush the nuns. As the nuns prayed on their knees with the people behind them, the tanks slowed and then stopped. Everybody waited for the next move. The crowd was silent, and slowly the hatch opened, and the soldiers climbed off the tanks and joined the nuns in prayer. Over the sounds of prayer, my aunt said that they heard a fleet of helicopters approaching. And as the Black Hawk helicopter reached the center of Edsa, Colonel Hanasan leaned out the window and swung a huge white flag. It was over. These nuns had led this crowd with their gentle and lowly hearts. Gentleness and humbleness are not qualities that we have. They are qualities we earn by the decisions we make. The decision is to put love above self-interest. The nuns were able to choose to be present with the people and have still confidence in the midst of chaos because they made the decision to act in love for the people of Edsa. We make these same decisions each day. We may not be the heroes of a revolution, but we find ourselves in our own chaos. We find ourselves in the chaos of our busy lives, working, trying to build our careers and our dreams, tending to our friends, raising families, managing our small children, our adult children, and our parents. Life does not slow down, and the national discourse can only be described as chaotic. We, through our heart, make decisions each day of how we will show up in that chaos. As I think about the decisions that I make, I know that I want to be present with people during times that feel hard. I want to show up and be approachable. I hope to be someone that people know they can talk to and trust. And I want to be a source of stillness in chaos and have a strength of confidence in my God no matter what is happening. And these things won't happen by accident. We build our muscles to make these decisions through the spiritual exercises, like the exercise of reading the Bible that we are stepping into as a community this fall. It is training. This is our spiritual gym. We spend the time training ourselves so that when the time comes, we can make the decisions that reflect the Imago Dei in us and in others. The moment that the tanks were rolling down Edsa was not the first time that the nuns chose love for people over their own self-interest. They had trained themselves for that moment without knowing it. The training was by daily making decisions that chose love. And over time, formed by their practices, they made the decision to get on their knees in front of that tank. It was the most natural, inevitable thing to do. It was not a hard decision, It was an expression of the habits of their hearts, lowly and gentle, the inevitable response to the heart of Jesus shown to them and given to them. May it be so with us as well.